He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, this is the Alex Marlow Show. Busy day today. We're going to spend most of the day with Trish Regan, but before we do that, we're going to do election recap, some Capitol Hill news, get a lot of variety of stuff going on. It's Liberation Day. We're recording this before the tariff announcement, so we'll dig into that big on tomorrow's show. Before I get in the news, I do want to tell you about the media being broken on a specific topic, which is spectrum. Spectrum is, you're going to hear a lot about this. This is a big part of the, I think, going to be a big debate here, even amongst conservatives. But for decades, big cable, legacy media have filtered information to hide the truth. But thanks to podcasts, new media like this show and all the great Salem shows, the truth can break through. And providing voices and views that legacy media block from the air. But big cable has one major way to control information, and that is access. They do this by limiting something called spectrum, which is the invisible airwaves that power affordable wireless internet. And by forcing you into their bundles, keeping independent media out of reach. You guys can picture this. How many people of you have family members who only watch 1 or 2 or 3 channels on TV because they just like to throw on the TV? Well, it's all spectrum. So it's all about the fact that there's certain networks that are have this ability to broadcast that is granted by the government. And so Trump and the Republicans in Congress, they have a chance to do something right, get this right, by making more spectrum available. This is how you can break big cable's stranglehold on information by making spectrum available, making it for sale. You can get more voices on the air, like these new media voices that are thriving right now, and it just make the access to new media content, I think a lot better. So there's a way to help. You call your members of Congress right now and your senators, your congressmen, senators, et cetera, call them right now. Say, please work with President Trump to make more spectrum available for sale. It's a big deal. All right. So let's get into the election news. It was actually kind of a status quo type day. Those of you who like big extended breakdowns of this stuff, I have a long conversation with one of our political reporters, Bradley J., about this at the Breitbart Fight Club. So you can check that out as well. But it was sort of how things were expected to go, with some light changes. Republicans won both of the Florida Senate races. That's where the positive news begins. So our majority now is a 7-seat majority, 220 to 213. There was huge levels of cash expenditure, particularly from Democrats, but these were 2 Trump seats and they were held. So Trump won both of these seats by huge margins, and they were tighter yesterday, but still pretty good. So State Senator Randy Fine, tech entrepreneur, he also ties to the gambling industry. He won Mike Waltz's race. This is the one we were concerned about because we thought that Trump won it by 30 and the polling was in the single digits. So he ended up winning by 14. It's pretty good. So he beat a Democrat school teacher named Josh Weil, who raised a ton of money. So it was one of the biggest fundraising hauls in House history, and they still lost by 14. So that's a positive thing. Though Trump did win it by 30, we only won it by 14 this time. But I think given the expenditures and the Democrats' focus, the fact that Trump's not on the ballot, so pretty good output. Exceeded expectations in that regard. And neither candidate lived in the district, which is also really interesting how that's a big thing. So Florida's first district, Jimmy Patronis, the state of Florida CFO, he's going to get Matt Gaetz's old seat. So Patronis won by 15. It was a Trump plus 30 district, but the 15 margin's fine for me because Patronis barely campaigned. He knew he was at such a big advantage that he decided he would basically he would just not. He would just not campaign at all for the most part because he thought that he could only mess it up, which is sort of hilarious in a way, and it worked. So he won by 15 anyway, so he avoided making any big mistakes there. The Wisconsin races were the Supreme Court went as we expected. So you guys are aware of this, so I won't dwell on it too much at this point if you're hearing the show. You're aware of this, but Brad Schimmel lost that race, and it was about a 10-point loss, which was bad. The polling was looking pretty bad. The sad part for me about this one is that sometimes you could point the finger easily to something, and this one looks like we just got beat. They obviously spent a lot of money on this circuit judge, Susan Crawford, and Schimmel seemed to run a good campaign, a robust campaign, but they couldn't overwhelm the Democrats' messaging machine there. So liberals will have now a 4-3 majority on that court, and they're going to redistrict, and they're going to do their best to redistrict 2 seats away from Republicans, which was the real stakes there. So we have that to look forward to, and we'll keep tracking that at Breitbart. But the Republicans' main message was this redistricting thing, and that the House is very close, and if we don't win this seat, then we're going to lose 2 House seats. That wasn't that effective compared to the Democrats, which focused on demonizing Elon Musk, demonizing billionaires, and on abortion. So that was big. I got a little audio. Here that I will play. Here's Crawford speaking at her victory, but just note her messaging here.
Someone who watches out for people. But I've got to tell you, as a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. For justice in Wisconsin. And we won.
Yeah, so there was a much more her campaign was much more heavily funded than very expensive race, and she's raked in tons and tons of money, but then demonizes Musk. So here's the message continuity. Here's Kamala Harris sent a really lame and lazy message on Crawford's behalf. Check this one.
There is an unelected billionaire who should not and will not have a greater voice than the working people of Wisconsin.
Okay, so there you go. So it's all about Musk. That's the message. Even lazy Kamala Harris is on message with the Musk stuff. So it's worth pointing out because it's a vulnerability because Musk is not doing a good enough job messaging on Doge's behalf. I don't think. I love Doge. Most of you probably in the audience love what Doge is doing, but this is a problem here messaging wise. It's pretty clear that they've keyed in on this and it's resonating with enough voters. I have to point out though how ironic it is that Kamala Harris is a creation of Laureen Powell Jobs, who is one of the richest women on earth, and she wouldn't have been the vice president. She wouldn't have been the nominee for president had it not been for a billionaire who inherited money from when she became the widow of Steve Jobs, the Apple genius, who also made a bunch of money with Pixar. So all that stuff. And they still message that way, and it's working. So one other thing, which is a big win for Trump and Republicans in Wisconsin, but also sort of scary in a weird way, is voter ID. So they had a big voter ID initiative, and the voters voted for it. So I say it's a little scary because it's also odd that the Republicans could not pull off the Senate. I'm sorry, not the Senate, the Supreme Court seat, but they did win the voter ID battle. So I don't really know what to read into that. It is a good thing. We like voter ID, and so that's a big positive, but it's a shame that we didn't get that Supreme Court seat. So pretty much as you would have guessed, I would say not a good or bad day. Both sides have a lot to take away from it, but we were not able to pull off that Brad Schimmel race, which is sad. One other political item, which is just a wild debate going on right now in Washington, and Speaker Mike Johnson and Anna Paulina Luna. Anna Paulina Luna has a resolution to allow new parents to vote by proxy. We love new parents, but we generally, as conservatives, think proxy voting as unconstitutional. So 96%, I think, of Republicans are with Speaker Johnson on this. I know Luna is a fan favorite of Breitbart and pretty much everyone who's on the online right, but only a few Republicans are backing her on this. But Johnson has tied her resolution to other stuff. So what's ended up happening is House business is now completely shut down. And this was sort of a gambit that Johnson made suggesting that Luna is going to get blamed for another lost week, but Johnson basically said we're not doing any more business until this thing gets resolved and she comes off of this. So the House is essentially shut down for the week, allegedly. And this Wednesday morning as I'm recording this, so we're just going to give up, I guess, more time to get Trump's agenda through, which is, as Stephen Miller's been pointing out, and I've been pointing out, the biggest asset that you are worried about as a executive branch is time. And this element of a ticking clock, it's very big. When I read James Comer's latest memoir that he's put out, All the President's Money, is that what it's called? It was largely about following the Biden family, but a lot of it's a congressional memoir as well. And he talked about how there's this constant ticking clock with things you're doing. So we're just throwing away some time here. So, but look, I'm sympathetic to Johnson in the sense that I don't think proxy voting is a great idea. I think it is a slippery slope, but also he made this move where he basically vowed he's going to hold up all of their business until this thing gets settled. So he didn't want to vote on Luna's resolution. So it's interesting because we're just holding up everything at the moment. So I don't know what's going to happen next exactly, but we're tracking it at Breitbart News. But it sounds like any sort of new legislation is sidelined for the rest of the week while this thing gets worked out. So Johnson's going to have to either sideline Luna's resolution and get through it, or a group of conservatives are going to have to come back around to Johnson. So we'll keep an eye on it, but sort of a mess over there. And not a great look. So we're going to have to figure it out. All right. So I mentioned Liberation Day. So this is the end of the world's trade war against America, is the way John Carney has framed it up for us at Breitbart News. And I think that's about right. That's a great way of framing it. And so we're tracking that right now. But this is Trump's chance from the Rose Garden to sell tariffs to the American public. Make the case that tariffs and restructuring global trade is a good thing. And he says he's going to make the case that we're going to increase factory outputs. And the fact of the matter is that this could be a opportunity for him to say that we're in a very fragile spot because we are so dependent on foreign goods, and we need to reshore more manufacturing. And that even though there might be some short-term pain, but maybe not, then there could be some deep long-term security issues. But say that there'll be a brief business adjustment period, but it won't be a collapse, and people have got to hold the line on this. But he's got to make the case that tariffs are not causing inflation, that they're actually revealing that we're dependent on foreign goods, and we need to be dependent on American goods. And the rebalancing of global trade is going to work. Canada's already talking about they'll pull off some tariffs on us if we will pull off some tariffs on them. This is all around the world. People are going to be looking at ways to work with us because they want to work with the America's economy. And it is an old model that we are retiring. So we want fair trade as a people. We want equitable trade. We don't want to get rolled on trade anymore, especially given our deficit and our debt, which is even people who are not debt and deficit hawks, I think you're starting to understand that this is an unsustainable way to run a country the way we're doing it now. So let's see what he says tonight, but I'm looking forward to it, and we'll break it down. We'll play some clips for sure tomorrow. And maybe I'll bring in Carney to do some analysis if I feel like I want to supplement. But that's all coming up. So looking forward to that as well. Hiring is accelerated in March despite all this tariff hysteria. So acting like the economy is on the verge of collapse. So much media noise. But the media noise I always say this, I take issue with Ben Shapiro on this, is that feelings don't care about your facts. So sometimes feelings actually become the reality. So people feel like the economy's bad and they think that Doge is doing a bad job and Trump's agenda is really bad. Then it does have a way of actually becoming a reality. But for now, it's not. For now, the fact of the matter is that hiring is accelerated. So people are happy with the way the economy is going on balance. The Democrats are in the spot now where they're demanding Trump return deported gang members to the United States. So this is where I feel like Trump can run up the score still. Jamie Raskin from Maryland, who has the worst hair in the Congress and also one of the worst guys, but he is basically demanding Trump administration to return these planes from people who were sent to El Salvador. So to fly them all back. The vast majority, if not all of them, are gang members or connected to gangs, and he wants them back. So that's the spot that the Democrats have put themselves in, and we need to emphasize that. We need to make sure our messaging is good. I was just talking to a friend of the show, but I don't need to out the individual. But I was just talking to them yesterday, who a very informed person and not aware of all of the deportations that are taking place at the success rate that we've already got 113,000 deportations. So over 100,000 since Trump's return to to his presidency. So, and these are people who are gangbangers for the most part. I mean, that's what they're looking at. That's who people are. That's in 71 days that we have just wildly accelerated the pace of deportations. And I feel like even conservatives aren't being made aware of this. So the messaging needs to be tightened up a little bit. And I think it can be. Let me check in on Spartacus. Is he done, President Cory Booker? He is done. So he finally finished up his speech. His speech went on for a record amount of time, like 25 hours. But the point I was making yesterday that's worth emphasizing is that his whole the nature of this long speech. He was not filibustering anything. He was purely grandstanding. It proved he had nothing to say because none of you remember anything. None of you heard an interesting line. All of it was recycling other people's ideas that were irrelevant just to complain about Trump. He's trying to come up with some sort of compelling way, not to change anything, but to get attention for himself. So he's a total dramatist, overly dramatic. But let's play a little bit. It'd be a shame not to see if we can find something interesting. So here's something from the speech. Check this out.
Universities that should be the bastions of free speech, free thought, free enterprise, intellectual research, academic research, scientific research are getting torn up by cutting indirect costs. I read stories.
Torn up, is that something people say? I didn't notice that. What does torn up mean? Also, the glasses are gone. I was commenting yesterday on how he let the glasses slide down his nose. So now they're gone. What's he doing? Just not doesn't need them now. Just sporadic glasses on the nose guy.
PhD programs that are virtually being canceled from the best scientific minds, not being able to build the state-of-the-art labs. The country that has led humanity in scientific invention is taking a blow. And Fareed Zakaria, I read his article here, and he's saying that China is doubling down on investments on the universities as this president is cutting them, unless, of course, you come to the leader and make all
right, so a lot in there. So cutting universities, cutting PhD programs. The universities are some of the most overfunded groups of people on earth. And what ended up happening during the Biden years is that there were all these handouts to the universities by way of the student loan forgiveness. A lot of it's unconstitutional. And what that did is it allowed for the tuitions to stay high and keep going up. So these universities, as we pointed out on the show and a Breitbart often, they're basically operating as hedge funds. They've got these multi-billion-dollar endowments, which just print money. So all the money gets invested and they make more money off of that. And then they still charge huge levels of tuition. They still get government funds. So if they're cutting PhD programs, it's because they're not spending enough money out of their own endowments. So they could just fund it themselves. Why does the government, when we have this level of debt and all these people are getting these degrees in things that are not useful, why should we fund people getting degrees that are not useful? If there really is such necessary scientific research being done, there will be funding for it because scientific research tends to make money. So scientific innovation is a way for people where the capitalist, the free market can solve that one. So you should not need the government for that stuff.
Make all these commitments, meet all of these.
Oh, and one more point. That's the China thing. First of all, they're communists, so of course they're going to be investing in stuff. That's what they do. Is that the government is in charge of all of the commerce that's done. So anything that's done, any innovation is done at the behest of the government. Second of all, they're propagandists, and Fareed Zakaria is not a credible person in this regard. So not to say that he's wrong on everything, but the China praise is clearly coming from a place that just is trying to knock this country. They just are trying to knock America. So always be skeptical when someone touts how great China is doing, because most of it is filtered. It's like when you go on Instagram and you see someone who's not as good looking in person. They look so good in their Instagram. Like that's what China does. That's the version of China that is presented to the
demands. There should be enough already. It should be enough already. And so this is that moment John Meacham told me about. I want us to try in the Senate. I know my colleagues. I see Tammy Bowles. I see
John Meacham is the historian who I wrote about in one of my favorite parts of Breaking the News, where he wrote a speech for Joe Biden, and he and he then went on TV to comment on how great of a speech it was. So he touted his own speech on television that he wrote for Biden and didn't disclose this. And I think he ended up getting fired or put in the bench at MSNBC or something for that. But this is one of the things that's useful about playing Spartacus is that you see he's got so little to say. He's not citing anyone interesting. He's not bringing any new ideas to the table. So that's why this exercise that he did, it's sort of hilarious, but it's important to make fun of these people because it actually, I think, puts him ironically in a worse position. It makes him seem, I think, dumber and less relevant than before. And more hysterical.
Chris Murphy, I see Angela Osmos. I love you guys. I've served side by side with you. I know your passion. I've heard your anger. I've heard your fear. I've heard how you want to fight for this country, but we are not enough. We can do demonstrations. We can do demands. We can try to do things differently. In fact, we must.
Well, the Senator.
I will definitely yield to Tammy Baldwin, my friend and my colleague.
To another question.
Thank you very much. I don't have that much gas in the tank, but hold on, let me say it right. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Oh, he's having a great time. Good. Well, whatever. I like the theater of it. Look, we gotta amuse ourselves during this political time we're in. All right. He showed up on a Rachel Maddow show. He gets to sit down. That must be nice for him. Did we get any sense of how wet the diaper was that he was wearing when he was done? Like, was it completely soaked through? Because I bring this up because it is disgusting and it's just noteworthy that he had to have had a diaper on, right? Like, you can't hold your pee for 24 hours, can you? Say it's quite the move because everyone's going to think of that. You don't have to have a high IQ to think of it. In fact, probably if you have a low IQ, you're probably more likely to come up with that thought. All right, let's hear what he talks about on Maddow.
I do really credit constituents who are impatient, who are demanding, who are scared, who are angry, and very understandably taking that anger out on Democrats who have to take some responsibility for being where we are in American history right now. And so the more I thought about it with my team, especially after the decisions we made revolving around the continuing resolution, I've been working so hard with my colleagues trying to get them to engage in social media, put more of their heart and spirit out there. They're doing an amazing job. They've almost quadrupled their numbers of engagement online. I've got colleagues open it up.
Yeah, so it's online clout chasing. So him saying that people engage with it online, yeah, it was the most popular thing on the internet yesterday, the Cory Booker stuff. So, but it's not, it's part of it's a Rorschach test is people are looking for some inspiration if you hate Trump and you hate Musk. But for those of us on the right, I mean, we're just making fun of the guy. We are making the points I'm making, which is that he speaks all this time and no one knows what he said.
TikTok accounts, but I suddenly realized that I've just got to do something myself. I've got to, try to prove worthy for my constituents that I'm willing to step out and step up in some way and hopefully be able to share their stories that were so hurtful and to read from my staff, people rendering their most personal stories about their fears or what's happening to their families. And so
all right. I can't do anymore. It's just, he's got nothing. It's all boring, right? Someone send me an email, aloha@alexmarlow.com if you've got one example of something he said that's interesting. Something original. All right. Other things that are going on. Criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been dismissed by a judge. I'm just getting that now, so you can get into that at Breitbart.com. We got coverage of that. Don't have a big take there yet, but interesting. One of the guys that seems to be more reasonable amongst the Democrats. California legislature is rejecting a law that bans men from women's sports. So California legislature rejects a law that's banning men from women's sports. I told you that this is the opportunity to do the greatest thing ever for this country and end the trans hysteria. One university needs to step up and field a team of all males for a women's sport and then win the national championship in dominant fashion. And once that happens, the trans stuff will go away. But we got to step up. One university has got to recruit a bunch of men Maybe they can wear wigs, like whatever they got to do, but they got to say they identify as women and then just completely dominate in a specific sport. I think basketball will be the best. That's my favorite choice, but they could pick a different sport as well. And then so once an all-male team wins the women's national championship, this will end. So we got to do it. Someone's got to step up, get it done. Last one for the day before we get into it with Trish Regan. Val Kilmer died, a Top Gun actor. He clearly wasn't doing well. I think he had cancer. Any of you who saw the terrific Top Gun sequel that came out a few years ago, everyone saw that. So I'm sure all of you did. But yeah, he had throat cancer. He looked very bad in that, and he hung on for 11 years. So that sounds not good. Eat some good movies. Everyone's going to recommend Tombstone to you. So sleeper though is Heat. Everyone should watch Heat. Heat's an amazing movie. Michael Mann. I really like that movie. So that's a good one if you're looking for people like to do that. But I would check out Heat if you're looking for a Val Kilmer movie. But Tombstone obviously is very good. And the original Top Gun, not a good movie, right? Like we all agree on that. It just had good soundtrack and maybe some good vibes. Second Top Gun was great though. But he's only in one scene. It's a good scene though. So it's sad there. And we think a lot about the culture here at Breitbart News. And one way to get involved with the culture, as editor-in-chief of Breitbart, I feel very passionately about Angel Studios. I've witnessed the profound impact that grassroots movements have had on our nation on the political front. 2024, we took back our country, we reclaimed our country. Now, this same group of people, similar people to the ones who got this election done for us, they're in the entertainment industry now, and they're trying to take back the entertainment industry from the woke snobs in Hollywood. And Angel Studios is really leading the way in this. It's grassroots-driven movie studio that's trying to help take back the culture. They're producing films that are resonating with audiences. Sound of Freedom, you guys know that one? Courageously exposes global injustices. Faith-based projects. I've got something called Riot and the Dance, which is really cool. His Only Son. They're delivering content that uplifts and inspires, and unapologetically patriotic films as well, like Mike Rowe's Something to Stand For and Homestead. This reminds us of our American values, the values that matter. So by joining the Angel Guild, you can actually influence what stories are being told, stories that are reflecting our shared values, and they entertain the family. They think about the family as well. So I encourage you to support Angel Studios in their mission to reshape our culture positively. You can visit angel.com/Marlow to become an Angel Guild member today. And this is a great way to champion these films that really, really matter. So we like Angels Guild, angelguild.com/Marlow if you want to get involved. One other one that I will note for today's show, but we're heading into it with Trish Regan, is Priority Gold. We love Priority Gold because if you think about the nature of the way the stock market has been, it's been incredibly volatile. We still have inflation. Dollars in a dive. But one thing that we know for certain is that gold has been crushing it, up 40% since the beginning of last year, about 11%. This year, over $3,000 an ounce. And it's not just gold, it's silver too. So we got the silver because a lot of these new industries that Trump is going to be, I think, creating policy to benefit are going to be dependent on silver, using a lot of silver. So silver is an amazing asset to have right now. And you can get both with Priority Gold. And what's really interesting is you can get a IRA, 401k with precious metals, gold and silver, tax and penalty free. You can do this right now. It is as much of a sure bet as you can get in this market. Gold goes up, big league. I've been saying recommend gold the entire time I've had the show, and it's only gone up since then, so I'm looking very good. It's a great way to protect your wealth in this volatile time, and it's a great way to support one of the great advertisers and sponsors of this show. So PriorityGold.com, you can text FREEDOM to 24999 as well, but it's sort of a no-brainer. You guys know that a lot of the prognosticators think gold's going to go up to $3,300 an ounce for this year. Maybe it'll be more. I don't know, because it just feels like if things boom, gold's going to do well. If things don't boom, gold's going to do well. Just one of those things. So Priority Gold, check them out as well. All right, let's get into it. Trish Regan, here she is. All right, I'm excited about this. Trish Regan is here. She is the host of the Trish Regan Show, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. But YouTube is really the best place for it. You got to admit, because it's a very visual, very fun, and I would check it out quite often. Trish, you guys know from Fox Business, and is someone that I think everyone at Breitbart is a big fan of yours, Trish. So thank you for doing this. My colleague on Salem as well. The show is live roughly at 2 p.m., and she's also got a newsletter, 76research.com, for that on business, financial stuff. Everyone should check it out. But let's go back a little bit in time, because the Fox Business stuff, it felt like you got pushed out for your Trump support. It really is that the case? Because you were very early on the Trump bandwagon. There were so few of us, so I remember it well. Because there's only a few of us who were into it quick. You were there, and then what happened?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm pretty simple, right? My whole background is in finance. I actually started in finance at Goldman Sachs, trading emerging debt markets before ever moving on into news. Was at CNBC and Bloomberg and then Fox Business. And so I am about as wonky as they can get for a television person, right? Like really wonky. Like I actually sit there and read everybody's tax policies. And I remember back in 2016, looking at the whole Republican field. Of course, I was moderating the undercard debate at that time, the Republican debate. And so I read every single policy and I'm like, Trump's is the best, like hands down, by far the best. I mean, Cruz was maybe a close second, but he had a VAT tax in there. So I'm just kind of a policy nerd when it's all said and done. I liked the way he was talking about things about remaking the economy. It's interesting because we're dealing with all these tariffs right now, but these were things that people had not talked about before. Things like trade deficits, Alex, that he suddenly made interesting and exciting and I think relatable. And so I thought, this guy's got it going on. And I liked his policies. And so I think, yes, I was supportive of him. I mean, I'm still, a journalist, right? And hey, I'm pretty agnostic in that you want to keep us safe. You want to help grow the economy. You want to make America stronger. These are values that I embrace. If they had a Democrat that did that, I'd be willing to take a look at them too. I thought that he was right on the money. And it was tricky. Yes, it was tricky at Fox. I mean, I think that they wanted us to seem as though we were critical at times too. But I'll tell you, March 2020, the market's tanking 2,000 points. I'm buying at that point, by the way. And I'm like, this is insane. You got CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of them going bonkers. And I'm like, wait a second, what are you going to do? You're going to shut down the entire economy?
Yeah.
That's really your answer? Don't you need a strong economy to fight this thing? And so sometimes there's some beauty in being sort of right and, understanding in the moment what's going on. But then again, there's the reality of the rest of the world and the fear that existed at that time, including at a lot of networks and perhaps my own being one of them. And so, yeah, you run up against that. So I look back on it and I think that there were just a lot of unknowns at the time and there was a lot of fear at the time.
Yeah.
In the end, it all worked out.
Yeah, but it's interesting going back to what drew you to him. It wasn't just his persona and his donkey on the media and all that stuff. And it's same for me. For me, it was all the immigration stuff first, and then I agreed with him on trade. I agreed with him on foreign policy. But I think the few of us who were around at the very start, it was ideological more than it was his personality. And I think a lot of people who were put off by his personality, which I wasn't. I loved it. But they didn't get that he had the best ideas in immigration. He had the best ideas in the economy. He had the best ideas on war fighting and all the stuff that was really appealing to anyone who could get past his personality, which again, for me, I didn't need to get past the personality because I loved it. But it was for those of you who were put off by it. And that's something that if you asked Ann Coulter or Laura Ingraham or Michael Savage or like the few of us who were there at the start, they'd give you a policy reason why they liked him.
Sure. No, I think, and it's like every good relationship needs to have some substance behind it, right? And I think that, a lot of us, like you, a lot of the Breitbart folks, myself, were very much attracted by the policy. For you, it was immigration. For me, the first thing that, I like numbers, right? I like his tax policy. I like his trade policy. And then the immigration stuff, yes, it all made sense. And then he had the charisma. Je ne sais quoi, shall we say. I mean, and nobody could come close on that. Nobody could come close. Because when you start making trade deficits sound appealing and interesting, wow, that's just a game changer. And I kept thinking, we have never seen a politician, maybe Reagan was the closest that could communicate in the way that Donald Trump could and can. And I think that comes from sort of who he is. There's a certain empathy that I think he has that a lot of these folks on both sides of the aisle completely lack. He understands, for whatever reason, even though he grew up in a fairly privileged background, he understands what it is like to be up against it. And I think too many politicians divorce themselves from that. And he connects with people on that. There's an empathy. I can remember once interviewing him, and he had to get to see some families who had lost their sons overseas. And he was really, he did a wonderful job on the interview, but he was adamant about he was not going to be late. He was not going to be late for those families. I've talked to him on background even about the reasons why, for example, when we pulled out of Syria, why that was so important to him. And he said, Trish, you try looking those families in the face after they've lost a son or daughter. You tell me you want to. And I mean, he really felt it. And I think that that's a difference. And I think people connect with that. So sure, there's a lot of razzmatazz. Sure, there's a lot of production sort of maybe values that go into this that he gets more than other people. But at essence, like when you get down to the core, he cares. He literally cares. And I think people feel that and they know that.
This is something that really came through. I spent some time with him 2 weeks ago, and he really cares about people. He really wants to take care of people. And if you ask him for a favor, his brain immediately, he's not put upon all, he wants to do it. And he was talking about how a lot of the people who he's reasonably so obsessed with some of the lawfare against him. And he's talked about all these people who've gotten caught up in it, who have been supporters of his, and how he feels bad for them too. He's not just focused on himself. He's talking about all the people around him who've had to deal with stuff and got pulled into stuff. And you can see that empathy, which is funny because he's such a ruthless politician where he'll take all these shots at people online who, when they have policy disagreements and they have political disagreements. But on a personal level, he really has that a fatherly nature that I think a lot of people really crave.
For sure. In fact, I've my dad would kill me if I said this because my parents are actually pretty liberal, but he's kind of reminded me, and I mean that in a good way. And so there's a patriarchal sense, like he's kind. He really, I think deep down, like is trying to do the right thing. He doesn't need this, for goodness sakes. Who the heck needs this, right? And he really does care about the direction that we're heading in. And so that's why people will stand in long lines on a rainy day or whatever to go into those rallies or to go to vote for him. He has a passionate base because they're looking at him and saying, for once, someone's willing to stand up for me. Someone was willing to take a bullet, literally, for me. And they're not forgetting that. And he's not forgetting them. It's a two-way relationship. And that's a very special thing. I don't think we have seen anything like that. And I don't know as we will, Alex. I mean, I look around at the field.
No, we're not.
Who's next? Like, who's inspiring people in that way? Who's got that sort of patriarchal sensibility? He's unique in that perspective. And I think that he's teamed up with some really smart, really good people. Scott Bessent, brilliant guy. I'm familiar with him from sort of financial circles and friends who have worked with him. You get David Sachs over there as the crypto czar. You've got Elon, of course. So you've got smart people.
His energy guys are the best. It's the Chris Wright and Burgum. I mean, those guys know what they're doing too. It's I don't know Lutnick very well. Lutnick's taken a lot of heat. Do you know anything about Lutnick?
Yeah, I've known Lutnick for years. I mean, look, he built an incredible business in Cantor Fitzgerald. He's been through hell on earth and back.
Amazing story there.
And he's a smart guy. I think, as Commerce Secretary, he's a great representative. I love him in that role. I think he'll stay. I mean, look, there's inside baseball always, and there's always people taking shots. And I'm sure he has a few enemies lined up because don't forget, he was the transition guy, right? Who put everybody into their gigs. And some people like their jobs and some people wish they had a bigger job. And so there's always kind of that back, it's politics, right? But Howard's a big boy and he's smart and he'll get through it.
Well, it's always interesting because we at Breitbart, we're Bessent guys, and we've always wanted him as Treasury Secretary. And I know Lutnick made a play for that at the end, and we were rooting for Bessent, and we went with Bessent, and then Lutnick ended up.
I'll just disclose that. Likewise, only because And to be fair, like maybe this isn't fair, but I just think there's a sophistication level there in terms of the intricacies of the financial markets that Besant
Perfect word
comes
for it.
by quite naturally and has been steeped in, right? And Howard maybe is better from a sales front, right? Like in running a business, and they're just different skills.
Yeah, but so what's interesting? So I've got no loyalty to Letnick at all. I've never talked to him. But I got to witness a off-record meeting of energy executives when I was at the White House, and I was impressed by his leadership. Like he had a great presence in terms of he was trying to get people to tighten up what they're asking for and to like actually paper it and say, it's got to be a tight ask. What is it? You got to be specific, and just pushing the biggest CEOs in the world and saying that you guys have got to tell us what you need here. There's a lack of clarity here. And I thought that was pretty good. It doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know if he's operating with the same level of detail as a Scott Bessent is. So Bessent's in a better, that's why I think Bessent got tapped as Treasury. But it'll be interesting to see what happens to him, because I know he's taken some heat and I just don't know that much about him. That's my entire interaction with him, which I liked, but it was not the wonkiness that, you're talking about.
Bessent's way more wonky. I mean, the one thing that I would say, and, look, he's wonky. I get it.
Which
I'm
I like.
wonky too, but at the end of the day, you got to communicate this message to the American people.
Yeah.
And the debt and deficit thing, it's bad, right? Like we can't continue on. Like this is horrendous. It's not going to end well. We can go back to the fall of Rome. I've studied that in depth, and at some point, you can't have people living off the dole, and you can't do every sort of military excursion all around the world that you want. At some point, the chickens come home to roost. So you need to. I think that message really needs to get out there to people. Like, I remember having this argument with Gene Sperling, who used to run the National Economic Council for Obama back when I worked at Bloomberg. And they were like, what is she doing? Why are they having this giant debate on the air? I remember I heard about it, for like weeks after. But my point to Sperling at the time was, he's like, we need to spend more. We need to spend more. And I'm like, but why? Like, can't you grow your economy? Can't you grow GDP and not spend more? Like, why do you have to keep on spending more? Like, my family just, if we get a raise, do we run out and buy a new car or buy a bigger house? Why can't we just kind of like manage our finances? Why do we have to spend more? And if you look back over the Biden years, what did they do? They spent more. They hired more government personnel.
So right.
Growth coming from government, and they ballooned themselves up. And I'm sorry, but like you can't be running deficits as though you're in a wartime, effort. Like we haven't seen that. Like ever. Like we have never spent like that. And so I think getting that message across is going to be an important one for Bessent and for Howard, however he can do that. And obviously Donald Trump and the Doge team and Elon have made that very clear too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have 4 children now, so I'm constantly thinking about how I can figure out how to make more money, because I know now I will efficiently never have enough. Like it doesn't matter if I get to must level. Right? So, but it's not about lifestyle at all now. It's just like it has nothing to do with like I need a nicer car. It all has to do with how do I start building nest eggs for all these small people who are dependent on me. So it's the why? How come I'm supposed to act that way as a individual, but our government is not supposed to act like that way at all? I was really blown away by that Doge meeting that Brett Baer had with all the Doge guys, and they're not the. It turns out they're not all big balls, the 19-year-old hacker. It turns out that a lot of these people are pretty sophisticated and made a lot of money and had a lot of career success. And they were identifying all these areas of specific waste in the government. And they really should have done more to message in this way, I think, from the start, because it was very persuasive to me, because they were just identifying these specifics of completely unreasonable expenditures that we just need to keep hammering those, because that is, I think, the core of what this first couple of months of Trump's presidency has been about, is identifying there's all this stupid stuff we're spending money on. We can stop. We just have to choose to. We have to fight through all the media noise on it. But it's
a lot of media noise.
Yeah,
I mean, think about
please.
that. So it's very interesting. I don't know how familiar you are with it. In 1948, because of the Cold War efforts, we put in something called the Smith-Mundt Act. And in doing so, we put up this Chinese wall where we allowed for the first time U.S. taxpayer money to go to the quote unquote propaganda effort. It was propaganda. I mean, any which way you slice it, so that we could influence how people were thinking overseas. And we sort of had the advantage, right? First mover advantage, because we were all over radio and TV. And so we got our message out, and we broadcast what we wanted broadcast out all over the world. And And we thought, okay, well, this is good because now we don't have to go to war with everybody. We can just fight for democracy in the name of democracy with our propaganda efforts. And that means, if we want oil from that country, well, we want that person to be in charge. So let's use our propaganda efforts and our taxpayer dollars to go spend money to make sure that that person is in charge. And then we'll have sort of the seamless relationship we want with that country. So there were strategic national security reasons for doing something like this. But here's the deal. You were never allowed to spend that money or turn it back on the USA itself. There was this, funny to call it a Chinese wall, but it was a Chinese wall effectively. You're not going to actually turn this on itself. And then in 2012, Alex, that kind of changed because Obama said, hey, we're dealing with our own democracy, our threat on democracy right here at home, because now there's this thing, the internet, and there's Twitter, now X. But they were like looking at all this and saying, wait a second, it's possible for all these foreign entities to put their information here. So how are we going to combat this? We'll use taxpayer dollars to combat this. And so in 2013, it got ratified under the National Defense Act. And what do you know? I mean, when you look at this USAID and all the money, right, that was, let's face it, going to the likes of Politico, you can call it political subscriptions, $10,000 a year, what? Like, I'm sorry, we know what that was. That was their way of disguising it. Or any of these NGOs, right? They were giving money to these quote unquote news organizations. Reuters, of course, had an overseas operation, but a lot of that was getting turned back on its head here. And I look at like how crazy the media was, and I kept scratching my head saying, why? Why? Like, these are good policies. I realized Donald Trump has some mean tweets. I realize he's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
But, the core policies are really darn good. And the hysteria, the level of hysteria was so off the charts. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, Smith-Mundt, from 1948, modernized in 2013. So all of a sudden, all this money that was getting spent, not just on overseas efforts anymore, but suddenly back here on ourselves. And I'm left thinking, I think that had a lot to do with the media hysteria, right, that we've seen. And they were all doing it in the name of democracy to save democracy from Donald Trump.
Doesn't it feel like that they're hysterical about any sort of change that's a wholesale change? And this is one thing that I mention to the audience virtually every day. I try to identify things that if they sound outrageous at first, you should do the thought exercise of, is this really outrageous? Like adding Trump to Mount Rushmore, Trump getting a third term. These things, like we're just conditioned that, oh, this is just outrageous. Well, is it outrageous? Maybe it is, but stop and actually think and reason through why you think it's outrageous, and just don't just think, well, I've never heard of this before, so it must be ridiculous. And I feel like the media conditions us on this, that the thought of cutting the Department of Education, it's like, well, what does it do? It doesn't do anything. Our test scores are getting worse. It's very expensive. And any sort of effort to federalize the education system is just led to more DEI and lower scores. So it's like, why are we doing this? Can we not spend that money? Can we maybe focus on local communities, families, et cetera? It should not be outrageous to consider those things.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. The DEI, okay, all the money. They've created a whole little infrastructure for themselves. They're employing, the PhDs in transgender studies have to go somewhere, right? So suddenly they get a job living off of Uncle Sam, effectively. They've created this, they used to talk about the big military industrial complex. I mean, that's what that is. And so when you talk about getting rid of these programs, when you talk about this change, it scares the living daylights out of them, because you know what, Alex? This is their livelihood. This is, it's funny. It all comes back to capitalism, doesn't it? I mean, this is their method of being, and you're actually going to be taking all that away. So that's pretty darn scary, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to preserve and hold on to whatever it is that they had.
Okay, so it's a big day. We're talking before the liberation takes place. Liberation's taking place after the markets close, which I think is intentional. But I want to get your take on some of Trump's policies specifically. Let's talk about his global reset on trade. We don't know exactly the specifics yet as we're having this conversation, but I want to talk to you about your take on his trade policies thus far, what you're liking, what you think it needs to be tweaked in terms of messaging, but just give me your 30,000 foot on this topic.
Okay, so typically what you're taught, in Econ 101 is that the law of comparative advantage here makes sense. So in other words, we don't want to be making widgets all the time with our steel factories, because actually, wouldn't we be better better off like thinking about how to create new financial products and have IPOs and blah, blah, blah. So therefore we value Wall Street more than we value those steel factories. That's all fine and dandy, of course, until you're like actually needing the steel factories. I think if 2020 taught us anything, it was that we need a big source of domestic production. When you can't buy Lysol because, the chemicals, they're coming from China, even though it's, maybe made in a factory here, and you're dependent on that source from China for something so basic, then you got a problem, right? So I think that the wake-up call has been we need to be more domestically focused on manufacturing and production of things that we might need. Now, will that cost us something in the near term? Possibly. I'm not going to sit here and say that tariffs are not going to be detrimental to the economy from an inflationary standpoint in the near term. However, the thinking is, and Besson's actually talked and written about this, and there's some other great writings on this, that eventually it kind of settles out because production reorients. So instead of getting all the parts, say from China, to make the Lysol, you might actually have a company here that provides those. And so one, you cut down on the transportation cost of getting it from A to B. And then two, you're employing American workers who are doing this right here in your backyard. And so there's an incentive to do it. I'm not saying, and by the way, Trump isn't saying this. I mean, he's all in, right? In terms of technology and the future of technology and all the benefits that are going to come from that. But you can't ignore this other incredibly important, vital part of the economy. We can't have everybody like go get a PhD in engineering. Like not everybody's, ready to do that, equipped to do that. You need everything else as well. And I think that for too long, the left didn't value all that. Whether you're the plumber or the truck driver or the electrician or the manufacturing worker, like these are people and career sectors we need. As for tariffs, do you think it's really fair that, hey, we send our widgets over to France and they slap on a nice hefty tariff and nobody buys, or, we have to depress our dollar in order to make the widgets more attractive in France, and yet they send their stuff and we don't charge? I mean, that doesn't seem like a very fair playing field to me. I think ultimately, like if you really get down to it, you might be in a situation where, hey, in an ideal world, there's zero tariffs on everything, right? So like we're actually all competing fairly against one another. But it's been a giant giveaway, right? To the Europeans and to everyone, frankly. And,
so where do we go wrong here?
We've lost jobs.
Right.
What do you think
Yes.
NAFTA did? I mean, thank you very much. Bill Clinton, that was your baby. And I look at towns like where my husband grew up outside Buffalo, where they had a really, thriving economy. And there's a whole factory there that made radiators for General Motors. And like all those jobs went to Mexico.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about NAFTA because this comes up on the show quite a bit, but I don't have deep expertise in the economy. I write about it quite a bit, so more than most people, but I certainly wasn't a Fox Business anchor like you, Trish. So this is really essential that we talk about how NAFTA was sort of a lie, and the free trade turned into a bit of a myth because it's one of these things that does look good in Econ 101 on paper, but that really wasn't the reality for Americans. And what ended up happening is that we ended up getting rolled on trade and ended up becoming sort of a welfare program for the rest of the world, where there was some merit to that, I guess, when we want the rest of the world to improve and thrive. And sometimes a rising tide lifts all boats, but it just got way out of hand when our debt and deficit got so big. But what do you think is the essential thing that we conservatives missed on trade that Trump saw and is why we need this reset?
It's a great question, Alex. And what conservatives missed was that the lifeblood of the American economy is its middle class. And if you do not have a middle class, a strong, thriving, vibrant, successful middle class, you don't have anything. I mean, you really don't. You might as well just become one of these Latin American banana republics where you get a lot on top and a lot on the bottom. And then I call it an hourglass economy. That's what we became. We became that hourglass where the middle class just got squeezed. And it's like no one cared. Conservatives didn't care. The liberals didn't care. You know why? They're all getting rich. And the capital labor equation got completely out of whack. Meaning, if you were an investor, your share prices are going up. And don't get me wrong, we still want Wall Street to do well, and we want share prices going up and the valuations on companies, American companies, to be great and high, and that's all good. But it was so out of whack so that labor no longer really even had any negotiating power.
Yeah.
At all. And the unions were in on it too. Think about it. I mean, the unions are part of this, right? And they sold everyone down the river. So there was no one looking out for the American worker. What does the CEO care about? Quarterly earnings. And if they can get people for less wages, and they can find another market, and they get the market in China that they can market to, and they've got lower wages in China or Vietnam or Mexico or what have you, that's what they're going to do. So nobody was protecting the American worker. And just from a national security standpoint, in addition to economic security, someone's got to look out for them. And conservatives didn't.
Yes.
Right? Because they just wanted to grow valuations.
That's right.
And the libs didn't. I mean, they should have, right? They were the unions, et cetera, and they didn't care. And consequently, we got this hourglass economy with tremendous disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Yep. And that's, I think, what Donald Trump, again, when we get back to empathy, and he understood, he related to, and he understood, and he's recognized for a long time that it was going in that direction, and it was wrong.
You're so right. The hourglass, that's a perfect way of putting it. It's exactly what's happened, is that the focus is on the very top, and then on the bottom with the welfare state, essentially, and the middle class completely ignored. And so I want to get your take on a couple of timely things. We watched Spartacus President Booker for 25 hours yesterday say absolutely nothing he speaks for more than a day, says almost nothing. That's his move. But one of the things he keeps talking about is how Trump is only looking out for billionaires. This is completely news to me. Is he onto something? Is Trump only caring about billionaires? Because I'm not.
No,
I missed that one.
That's what they're going to try and tell you, right? Because of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And the reality is, the billionaires, they got it. I'm like, they got really hit, right? Like, a lot of people got really hit. Yeah. Think about how taxes went up when SALT went into effect, right? You couldn't deduct your state taxes in New York anymore. Look at all those New York billionaires. I mean, heck, Carl Icahn, whom I've known well for years, another kid from Queens, so to speak, a billionaire who left New York City and actually was really supportive of Trump, which was interesting. He got a little bit reluctant to talk about that support because he got so hit by it, I think, at one point. But, in those early days was quite vocal for him. He wound up moving to Florida. I mean, everybody's moving to Florida, right? You're out, dare I say, you're on the West Coast, the left coast. So, you suffer your own pain out there. But I think a lot of people are actually leaving California as well and going to places, right, like Texas, and going to places like Florida, where you can have a fighting chance. Trump was not looking out for the billionaires, certainly not the billionaires on the East and left coast when he did that move. I find it sort of comical. What are they going to say, right? They try to pretend they're like the man of the people, but they're not. Like, there's no evidence in any of their policy that they're actually looking out for that middle class. Maybe they're looking out for the very, very bottom, right? They want people to come here.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's how they get their votes.
$300 a week to spend on food in New York City, plus a hotel room with daily maid service for 6 months. Not bad, right? But they're not actually doing anything for the person that's working 2-3 jobs trying to save for their kids' education and maybe take a vacation once or twice a year.
Okay, so what do you want for? We're looking to our crystal ball here, looking at the trade reset. What do you think are the key pillars of the Liberation Day? What are you looking for in terms of policy?
Equity, fairness. If you're going to tariff us, we're going to tariff you.
I can't believe you said equity, because I've been calling it equitable trade. It's because I feel we got to reappropriate that word.
That sounds like a leftist thing to say.
Yeah. So I floated it to Peter Navarro, and I said, we got to call it equitable trade. And he rejected it so fast and make your head spin. Like, he was like, no, we are not doing this. I said, I think you should. I think that's the branding. I think it's how you got to do it.
Well, what's fair is fair, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, why do we have to give anything away to him? Again, like, I understand sort of the premise of it, right? And we do want to focus on those sort of higher tech opportunities as a country. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that everything in this economy matters. Everything matters, and everyone matters. And I think that the left and the right for too long have just been focused on sort of that top end stuff. And this is what's going to make us the most in terms of our GDP, et cetera. And we'll just give away, to anybody else who's down on the bottom. And I get back to, if 2020 taught us anything, it's that you should not be so reliant on foreign supply chains.
Yes.
Have your own. Do your own
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. So I think anything that gets us moving that direction is a positive. Do you feel like the administration's messaging well on trade in particular and tariffs?
No, I think that they need to drill down harder on the mistakes that were made, that Biden was spending like a drunken sailor and hiring every Tom, Dick, and Harry and Susan, Jane, and Smith and, I don't know, the people in between, right? Whatever it was crazy, right? Like hiring ballooned like you wouldn't believe for the government, spending ballooned for the government. And so I think that they really need to help crystallize that in ways that everyday folks can understand. Again, like if you're running your own household a certain way, don't you expect the same from your government? And I think people get it that Donald Trump is committed to that. But look, I mean, the left is running with this Elon message all day long. And it's, is it successful for them? I mean, I guess in Wisconsin it was. I worry about that. I think that it's going to, look, the economy is going to matter. It depends on where we are in 2 years, Alex. Like he's got a very, very narrow time frame. Inflation is a hard thing to fight. And Biden didn't make it easy. And Jerome Powell, for that matter, didn't make it easy. You've got so much money printing that happened, so much spending that happened, and now you've got to back off of that. But is inflation going to come down? Can it come down fast enough? It's going to be a tough report card in 2 years. And I'm telling you, he's got to win the House and Senate again. Otherwise, they're going to go after him with everything they've got. In all seriousness. So if we want these policies to work and stay, they've got to communicate this message at least, for 2 years from now. And hopefully we'll be in a better position. Hopefully inflation will have come down. Hopefully GDP will be growing and we'll see success in the economy. Hopefully the stock market will be okay. I mean, I actually love what he's doing. And I look at every time the market goes down as a new opportunity, right? And it's something we talk about.
Well, flesh that out, because I'm with you, and people who've been with me a long time know that I was actually critical of him for focusing too much on the stock market when he was running for re-election, and it didn't work out for him. So I think now he seems to not be fixated on it, and I like it, but I want to hear from your perspective.
Well, look, everybody is somehow invested in the market, and even people that maybe think they aren't, union workers, they're the ones that are buying into all these funds. Okay. So most people have some exposure, some way, shape, or form. And if they don't, they should, right? I'm going to encourage them right now. Again, like go out and make sure you be careful and cautious about it. But anything that you can save, you should be putting into the market, because in that capital labor equation I was talking about, again, capital was what was valued so much. And I don't entirely see that shifting massively in a way that we're going to go back to, say, 1960s style relationships between capital and labor. So you still want to be invested. But yeah, I hear you. I think saying, oh, the stock market's at an all-time high, I'm so great. People don't relate to that so much. Like they know what it costs to put dinner on the table. They know what it costs to go to a movie. They know how much a dozen eggs are. And so you started to that's the kind of, and he gets this, like he totally, if anyone gets this, like that's the bread and butter, I think, for American families. The stock market is just gravy.
Okay. So consumer sentiment's down. And do we feel like this is just Democrats that have just been hearing that Trump is going to end the world because he's president? And how much of this is just the relentless media negativity on tariffs?
Oh, it's totally the relentless. In fact, I'm trying to pull up this chart because I was looking at a chart the other day that actually dove into this, because it was amazing. The disparity between the left and the right in terms of the direction they saw this economy going in. It was pretty darn staggering, to the point where, you look at, say, the PCE indicator that came out, which is the Fed's favorite gauge on inflation, and it was a bit higher than expected, but nothing like what the left. So there was and I'm not actually seeing it just yet, but it was really kind of tremendous to look at. Effectively, the left and the right being so fiercely divided on where they thought inflation was. And that's when you start to say, okay, you guys are not reading this correctly. None of you are reading it correctly because you're letting your political bias totally dictate what you think about inflation. And the reality is, yes, we have you know what? I did find it. So basically, Democrats, University of Michigan, expected 1-year change in prices. They think it's going up 6.5%. Republicans think it's going down 0.1%. What I would tell you is inflation 1 year, it's probably going to come in somewhere around 2 to 2.5%, which is exactly where the Fed wants it. But when you see a chart like that and you have such disparity between what the left and right is thinking, look, the left, they just assume the worst, right? And I think that they're being fed a narrative in the mainstream media over and over again. Even the Wall Street Journal, by the way, I always find that to be an interesting barometer. Don't forget, that's also like a Fox Murdoch company. But the Wall Street Journal has been super negative on the economy and all this stuff.
They've been on a jihad against Trump. They really have. It's been, we did a big story on it, Breitbart. I can't believe how just every day you open up that paper and just here's another thing Trump's doing wrong. It's hard to believe.
So if you don't consume conservative media, right, like a Breitbart or a Trish Regan show or whatever, and you're just inundated with whatever you're getting from the likes of New York Times, Politico, even Wall Street Journal, then your viewpoint on the world is, oh my gosh, we're going to have 6.5% inflation. And I think, maybe you're a little too optimistic if you think inflation. I mean, we certainly don't want deflation. That's a whole other can of worms that we can talk about another time. But we don't want deflation. And so the truth is somewhere in the middle. And it's probably somewhere between the 2 to 2.5% range, which is fine, by the way. That's actually good. That's what you want. Look, I think that would be phenomenal if we get that. It might be 2.5 to 3% if you can't quite bring it down enough. We'll see. But it's not what the left thinks. And by the way, it's not what the right thinks.
All right. The corporate America is moving away from the ESG and the DEI. And you could see this in Larry Fink's annual letter that he puts out, which had no climate change talk, no diversity talk, no inclusion talk. This is a big evolution. Why do you think they flip so hard on this? And it just suddenly they're just out on the DEI stuff. It seemed like overnight.
Well, I think Larry's a realist and he realizes this is not making him any money. I mean, it's just not, right? I mean, you look at Disney, perhaps the best example. That's your DEI top, Snow White and the 7 CGI dwarves, right? That is your top on DEI. And Disney is a company, that stock price trading under $100 now. It was up over 200 just 5 years ago. They should have taken Nelson Peltz's advice, the activist investor who came in there and said, you got to get rid of this DEI stuff. You got to actually focus on stories that people want to hear. Forget these wokeified sequels. But Disney did not take that advice. And Disney moved forward with all this. And now they're backing away from it, too. They're also in a lot of trouble with the FCC and Brendan Carr, who just sent Iger another letter the other day. Look, I mean, if you think about this, DEI is actually illegal, right? That's constitutionally not okay because that's a form of discrimination.
Sure.
And a lot of these companies could be in trouble. So I think they're backpedaling away from it because they know that they're, at odds, frankly, with the Constitution and they're at odds with this administration. But this happened importantly, even before Donald Trump became president, you started to see companies back away from it. And I think, again, it's going back to the reality check that, hey, we're still capitalists here, last I checked, and we still need our shareholders to make money. And if you're too obsessed with, checking every single box and making sure you get somebody with purple hair and pink hair and, identifies as this, that, or the other on your board, then you're not actually doing the right thing for the shareholders of the company.
So, we have a shared interest And that's in one of the most racist Americans in public life, and that's Jasmine Crockett. I know she pops up on your broadcast as well. We've changed the spelling of her name to Jazz, Jasmine, because she's got that jazz to her. It's she's
Total jazz.
She's the gift that keeps on giving, because I feel like she's the id of the modern left right now. Like, she just says all the things that they're thinking, but no one else is saying it, and she says it with this inflection that's she just debases herself every day. It's the should you and I start a fund for her so that we can make sure she runs for president? Because I just want her out there more.
I was watching a lot of her tape recently, and I said this to a friend. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hand it to her. Talent, I'll give it to left or right. I don't care. This woman is way more talented than AOC.
She's way more. So with you. I'm so with you. AOC has lost her fastball compared to Jazzmin.
Like, she's good. She's good. She may be somebody that they continue to position more and more. I mean, she also just says such outrageous stuff, to your point, Alex, that she winds up landing herself in the media coverage because of it. And I think that she will have a following.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually very good for conservatives, because when push comes to shove, nobody's going to put Jasmine Crockett in the White House. Like, I think I'm going to think you can take that one to the bank. I'm pretty darn confident of that. But she's talented in that she's able to kind of walk the walk, talk the talk. I mean, look, I think Byron Donalds is enormously talented. And by the way, he does come from the hood. And Byron actually pulled himself up by the bootstraps, like single mom, grew up in the Bronx, didn't have a lot, and said to himself, he worked in finance before he ever got into politics. He said, I actually want to understand my path out. And he is a real success story. She, on the other hand, I mean, I'm not saying she's not a success story, but, she didn't grow up like Byron did. But now she's taking aim at Byron, and, he's married to a white woman. So blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, like, lady, come on. But she'll keep doing that all day long. And I guess she'll continue to get coverage. AOC may be getting a little bit mad. She's stealing some of the thunder, but so be it. I'm with you. Okay. Like, fine. You want her as the leader of your Democrat Party. You do that. You see where that gets you.
It's this very strange fetishism that goes on, though, with Democrats. That Crockett went to prep school and she spoke like a normal professional person when she was elected to Congress at first, and then now she speaks like she's ratchet and from the hood. And like, Byron Donalds has arrests in his past, and then now he is a great classy presenter. And so it's just a total. We on the right, like, we want people to assume a leadership posture, and on the left, they actually like when people debase themselves and act like they're from the streets even when they're not. And there's a cultural appropriation to Jazzmin that it adds to some of the performance art that is just irresistible from a content perspective.
Yeah. I mean, she's watchable, right? She is watchable. I will give her that. I literally sent that to somebody just yesterday, because I had looked through, we did do a kind of a big thing because she's now in new trouble. I guess U.S. Attorney's Office is looking at, in Washington, D.C. at this assault, alleged assault on a reporter. Think about this. Like, can you imagine going and grabbing someone's camera and like, I mean, I actually can't. I mean, if somebody was asking me questions, I felt uncomfortable. Like, I might turn my head away. I might speed up my walk. Do you think I'm going to like physically like go and grab their camera? That's a bizarre thing to do, especially as a member of Congress. The guy that was asking her a question, it was a simple question. Like, do you want to walk back anything you said about Elon Musk, Representative Crockett? And she kind of went bonkers on him, allegedly, per the tape. I mean, at least put her hand like right over. I think it's a bizarre response, but even more bizarre is how the media like immediately is all over him and like, oh, like this is ridiculous. Can you imagine if the tables were turned? Can you imagine if Comer did that to somebody from the Daily Beast? Or MSNBC? They'd be freaking out.
I don't know. It's working for me, and I like the fact that it makes AOC look like she's just phoning it in at this point. Trish, I don't need to keep you this long. You're fun to hang with, and it is. I promise you, the next time I invite you on, I'll get your take on the news, and I will let you go on with your life. But it is. I couldn't resist keeping this long. This has been so fun. I got to ask about your newsletter, the 76 research. Tell us about this, because people are familiar with the show, I'm sure, if they're hearing this show, you get Trish Regan show. It's live at YouTube at around 2 p.m. Eastern every day. And you can also get on your podcast feeds. It's Salem joint, so it helps rising tide in this instance. But tell me about 76 Research.
Thanks for asking. By the way, huge Breitbart fan. I read you guys literally every day, maybe
Thank you so much.
8 times a day. So I like the refresh
huge
content.
Trish Regan
I
fans.
love the way you package your headlines.
Trish,
I love your show. So
before,
I'm delighted to be here, Alex. I really, really mean that. And look, there's a little bit of a mission. I think we have a common sort of feel for patriotism it's really, really important. And it's important people subscribe to all of these things because we want that direct connection with them. But in terms of the newsletter, 76research.com is something I started with a long time friend who worked on Wall Street for many years. And of course, that was my background before being in the financial media. And I really felt like financial media did a disservice to everyday investors because they panic, right? And they just hate Trump, and they're always going to hate Trump. And that's, Fox Business less so, but look, it's, we were just talking about the Wall Street Journal. I think that there is a bias towards reporting sort of the hysteria of the moment and not actually giving people a lens to look through for the long term. And so how do you make money in all of this is an important thing. A lot of people have come up to me over the years, over and over and over again, from makeup artists to people on the street. What do I buy? What do I invest in? Should I be investing? And the answer is yes, you should absolutely be investing. And you have to think about what your time horizon is, whether you can be in something that's more growth oriented because you have the time, or whether you want to be in something that maybe is more of a dividend income play because you want to, hopefully retire in a couple of years. And so I felt really strongly about wanting to set something up, and the just timing worked with a friend of mine who was retiring from Wall Street. So we put together 76research.com. There is a free investment newsletter version of it. You can go to investinmaga.com, and we have some names there, et cetera. Or you can sign up for the 76 report at 76research.com. It's just $1 a month for the first 2 months, and then it goes to $9.95. You can cancel anytime. And then we have model portfolios. And so the model portfolios is really where a lot of the action is. And there's about 10 to 15 stocks. They've all done extraordinarily well. And I'm super proud of it. We just came up on our 1-year anniversary. And look, it's like something I wanted to do, Alex, for 20 years. Always wanted to do. And now I do it. Now I have the freedom, serious freedom, because I'm not working for Fox anymore. I'm not working for anyone. I work with Salem in a partnership that I love, but again, there's no sort of boss breathing down your back saying you can do this, you can't do this, you can say this, you can't say that. And so I have the freedom to do this, and it was a passion project, and we've done enormously well. I think hopefully, we're making people a lot of money. We've got a lot of subscribers, and keeping them informed about the reality of these markets and trade policies and what it's going to mean for you.
Trish Regan, really appreciate you. Thanks to our producer, Misty, and all of you in the audience. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much, Al.